speaking of fintech, we had a lot of earnings that have come out recently, and so we wanted to touch on those here this week. A company that you follow, you've called it out as your one to watch before, Green Dot. Earnings came out, and it looked like the stock felt a little bit of pressure from that earnings report. What were a couple of your top takeaways from Green Dot's most recent quarter?
Well, the numbers looked good. They beat earnings, they beat revenue, but the guidance was a little bit light. If you've been following it, the stock is down from after earnings, and it's not that the guidance is disappointing. They're still projecting 10% year-over-year earnings growth, 6% revenue growth. But my takeaway is that from a short-term perspective, a lot of people don't want to pay 20 times earnings for a company that's growing at 10% in the immediate term.
Makes sense.
Over time, I think Square's business is it's ahead of its time in some ways, especially its banking as a service platform. So while it's only projecting to grow about 10% this year, I think that doesn't really give credit to the long-term potential of its business. So as a long-term investor, I like I like Green Dot, especially after
Don't worry.
I know things are on the brain. I like Green Dot after earnings with this new lower price. If you have a long time horizon, you might not be happy with my recommendation in 6 months or a year, but I'm very confident that in a decade that Green Dot will be a much larger company than it is today, especially if it keeps picking up partners like Apple, Uber, and some of the others that it's added recently.
Well, I think that's what investors want to hear. I mean, we certainly never profess to take that quarterly view. I mean, we like to look at quarterly earnings and see how the companies are doing, but we're looking at these businesses from the perspective of 3, 5, 10 years. And so it sounds like Green Dot still has plenty of opportunity there. Talking about plenty of opportunity, I'll jump into Mercado Libre here real quick. Mercado Libre was my one to watch last week. And while I think it really gained recognition early on as the e-commerce king of Latin America, I mean, this has clearly become a case of an e-commerce business that has become quite an attractive payments business as well. And I was talking about this on Motley Fool Money this past week. When you look at the numbers that are going through Mercado Libre's network, it's really quite impressive. I mean, forget about the e-commerce business for a minute. I mean, they brought $5.3 billion of total payment volume through their networks over the fourth quarter. And I mean, when we talk about how successful that is, what's even more impressive is really the offline payments that are going through their platform. If you look at the actual offline payments, I mean, they continue to just bring dollars that aren't necessarily originated from their e-commerce platform. The total off-platform payment volume grew on a currency-neutral basis, grew 172% for the quarter, which is impressive, obviously. And for the first time ever, off-platform payments processed more than $2 billion in transactions, reaching almost 70 million payment transactions in a single quarter. And so I think that really just seals the argument that a lot of us here at HQ have been making for a while, and that Mercado Libre really is as much of a payments company as it is an e-commerce company. And I think that's where e-commerce companies are really succeeding, is being able to become more than just the place where people are buying it, but they're using services like payment platforms and whatnot to keep their customers happy. It's very sticky, and it's something that I think will continue to benefit the company for some time to come. So not surprising that the stock continues to do very well. Matt, let's pivot over to Square real quick, because this is one that you and I both follow. Earnings came out. Kind of a funny reaction from this one. The market initially was selling the stock off. By the end of the day, it seemed to be back in the good graces of the market. What were a couple things that stood out to you for Square's most recent quarter?
Well, first of all, I wish I had bought it the morning after earnings.
Well, timing is everything.
It was a really just a knee-jerk reaction. The guidance for the coming quarter is a little bit weak in terms of earnings. If you care about the profitability of a company that's growing at 65% year over year, but investors quickly wised up to the fact that Square, it's not about current profitability. It's not about are they losing money right now? Because when a company's growing like that and has cash in the bank, who cares? Is kind of my opinion on that. But just kind of some of the highlights I like out of Square's earnings. Obviously, the revenue growth is impressive. Even not including acquisitions, they're growing at a rate of over 50%, which is huge. Their services business continues to grow to more than double year over year. The biggest highlight to me is the Cash App users. They only report Cash App users once a year. Last year, they reported that there were about 7 million active users in December 2017. For December 2018, that number more than doubled to 15 million. Now, it's worth pointing out that this is not an area of the business where they're making money yet. Square makes the bulk of its money still from payment processing, small business lending, and things like that. Where this really comes into play is this could be a huge long-term driver of growth in other areas. Specifically, Square has said many times that it wants to get into the consumer side of the financial industry, offering things like high-yield savings accounts, personal lending, an investment platform, things of that nature. So this is an active user base of 15 million people that they could potentially cross-sell those products to who are already part of the Square ecosystem. Just to put that number in perspective, Square's core customer is the small business, and that customer base is about 2 million large. So this is a customer base that's more than 7 times their small business customer base that is currently not being monetized. And that just kind of, this doesn't factor in any future growth. I'm pretty confident in saying that next year when we hear the Cash App numbers, it's going to be a whole lot more than 15 million. So this is really an untapped and rapidly growing source of future revenue potential for the company that I really don't think the market's fully taking into account yet.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, there's a lot to like about the quarter, and I mean, I continue to just be impressed by the opportunity that's in front of them in regard to how many dollars are going through that network on a yearly basis. I mean, we were looking at PayPal for 2018, and they're closing in on $600 billion flowing through their networks, and I mean, Square is essentially a tenth of that. And growing at double-digit rates, very similar to PayPal. And so you can see plenty of opportunity there for Square to capture. And speaking of, you know, the Cash App being maybe, it's not something that's profitable right now, but we saw much the same thing in Venmo early on for PayPal, and they had the wherewithal to acquire that. And that's now becoming a channel that they're starting to rely a little bit more on and work with a little bit. And, you know, I'll just speak from personal perspective here. I mean, my daughters are to the point now we just got them their first phones, and we're looking to create sort of an opportunity for them to have their first quote unquote banking relationship. So we all downloaded the Cash App, and we all set up Cash Apps on our phone, and it works seamlessly. I can transfer money to their accounts. They can give me cash if they don't want to hold it. I can give them the money through their Cash App. And we're all very happy users of that Cash App, too. So we tacked on a few more users there. They'll be able to count us in next year as well. Yeah, I mean, a lot to like. And I like their efforts to figure out new ways to extend capital to their merchant customers. The Square lending side of the business, I think, is going to be huge. Square Capital, business services, all of those types of things, just tremendous opportunities. And I think we all know by this point that Jack Dorsey certainly is a very long-term, big picture kind of thinker, not concerned with those quarterly numbers whatsoever. And so, yeah, I remain a happy shareholder. It sounds like you do too. And I think that all the folks out there in our foolish universe who have picked up shares of Square along the way should feel encouraged as well, right?
I bought Square for $11 a share and haven't sold a single one yet, if that tells you how confident I am in the company long term. Even though I could lock in, the 600% profit right now if I really wanted to. I'm convinced that this is still just the beginning.
Well, the only way you get that 10-bagger is by hanging on. So,